Welcome to the Unfair Advantage Sessions, a series of interviews with some of the world's top leaders in the digital, social, and research technology industry. My name is Kelvin Jonck. I'm the MD of YOUKNOW, a company that's all about bringing global technology and service providers, connecting them with African professionals and service providers, and just bridging that gap. And I believe that the tech is only as good as the people behind them. It's from the end users and their needs to the creators, the founders and the leaders of the companies and the clients themselves. So these interviews are intended to deep dive into the experiences, the history and the philosophies that led these leaders to where they are now. And our goal is to uncover their unfair advantage. And with me today is the evergreen, completely affable powerhouse that is Mike Stopforth, somebody I've had the pleasure of knowing for, it must be, Mike, what, 10 plus years now, and somebody who's defined our local industry in so many ways, massive influence on my career and someone I respect immensely. So Mike, thanks for joining me today.
Sure, Kelvin, I'm flattered. That's very kind of you to say that. Good to be on the show.
Yeah, thanks, man. We must have, I don't know if you remember better than me, we must have met around 2009, 2010.
Yeah, you were a client, or at least a prospective client. I don't know if I ever closed that deal.
No, you did indeed. You did a great job. I remember we were in the Cell-C canteen with Warren Moss from Demographica, and you guys did some content work for us. I think it was a blog called geekery.co.za. I actually,
we did,
yeah. I looked it up. It doesn't exist anymore as a domain. But that was Cerebra, right? I mean, that was what, 2009, 2010. That was you being part of Cerebra. I think a brand that a lot of people in our industry know. How far into the Cerebra journey would that have been?
Yeah, so that would have been 3 or 4 years into Cerebra's journey. So we registered the Cerebra entity in 2006, formalized what was at that point in time, I guess, a loose collaboration between myself and Dave Duarte and a couple of other guys that saw an opportunity to, I guess, legitimize social media as a communications channel for brands. And, by the time we were talking to you, fortunately, the entire industry had exploded. And I guess we were sort of these unwitting forerunners riding this wave of this trend that had suddenly become an extremely prevalent consideration for a lot of people. So I think we considered ourselves super lucky.
Yeah, I forgot. I'm actually trying to think whether I knew or maybe just forgot that it was Dave Duarte that you started the company with. That was, that's quite a memory as well. So, I mean, you've touched on it now, but maybe for the two people that don't really know Cerebra, how would you describe it? What were you guys trying to do? What was that void that you were filling in that industry that by 2009 was starting to flourish?
Yeah, so there was a sense that traditional agency service providers were struggling to grapple with the conversational nature of social media. And because we had come from a non-traditional agency background, we were a lot more comfortable helping brands navigate through this idea of, how do we show up as conversational personalities in the social media realm. And so originally, a lot of our work came from partnerships with agencies that already had established relationships with clients. And this quite often happens in our industry as you get very niche providers coming into the space as new tools or new ways of communicating become prevalent. Then they sort of define an offering and they become agency partners. And then as they grow, they sort of become service providers in their own right. That cycle seems to repeat on itself over and over again. What we avoided doing, though, and I see a lot of agencies who start as very niche service providers getting to the point where they have to decide whether or not they're going to diversify and start to add other adjacent services or offerings that are kind of similar to their niche, but maybe not core. And we decided not to. We decided to stay quite passionately committed to just doing social media, even when at the time, I mean, if we're thinking 2009, 2010, this is the time when those social media platforms started to commercialize, so started to add promotion and advertising into their commercial mix. And even then we were like, well, do we become a paid media company that just specializes in social? And we didn't. We stuck to our guns, rightly or wrongly. I still don't know whether that was a good or bad decision, but we stayed committed to figuring out how to create great content, organic content, and how to manage customer service in that realm. And the latter part of that, I think, was the part where we really did great work, and where we were willing to take on work that I think a lot of people just didn't want to get close to, didn't want to touch with a barge pole, because of the risks involved and the unknown elements in that space. But I'm really glad we did. I think in a way we kind of defined how that work was supposed to be done, and that stood us in good stead later on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's as many companies that kind of ended up, in the mid 2010s and later on as focusing on that social care element, which I think is where you guys were getting a lot of business and focus at that point. But back in the early stages, it was all around this content creation, the understanding of filling that gap. Was there a lot of competition at that point, or were you guys potentially one of the first people to maybe make it known that this is something that needs to be focused on?
So originally there wasn't much competition at all. Actually, it was great. We were pretty average at content creation, and yet, as I keep saying, in the land of the blind man, the one-eyed man is king, right? Like, so we were the only people doing it. So even though we were cuck, we were like still the best. And then every agency on the planet realized that there wasn't really anything special about social media content creation. If you created content for any channel, you could replicate that skill set in the social realm. And suddenly we were like, oh no, everybody can do what we can do in that regard. So it forced us to get better very quickly. And I mean, we hired Jacques Shalom at that stage, who'd come from a traditional agency content generation environment, and he really legitimized our offering in the creative space. And I think we then realized we had to add a solid analytical underpinning to what we did. So at that point in time, we kind of spun off four offerings, right? There was the insights offering, which focused on the work that you do, and worked very closely with partners like yourself to help clients build a solid analytical foundation to their work. There was the agency work, which was the content creation piece. There was the more advisory or consulting elements, which I think we loved doing because it elevated the level of influence that we had in our clients, and gave us a seat at the most important decision-making tables in the client. And then, of course, the academy work. From the beginning for Cerebra, a big part of our focus was educating our own market. And I loved doing that work. I still do. I mean, I think I'm a closet teacher that has just kind of consistently veiled that passion in other businesses that I create. But I've always loved trying to help people understand new ideas and new trends, new technologies in a way that's very accessible and easy to kind of grasp onto.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's always been very clear to me as well. And I think something that I've also tried to emulate a lot of, that whole education element of what you guys did from the early stages and through the rest of the business. There was a kind of a dual side to that as well. You as Mike Stopforth, through this education initiative, or this teaching, let's call it an ambition that you've always had, was you were able to be front and center, be a speaker at a lot of events, be invited to lots of panels. And that was, I suppose, very important for the brand of the company and for yourself as well. I feel like that was quite an important part to the success of the business, wasn't it? You being wanting to, I guess, be front and center and spread the gospel of what you believed in, right?
Originally, certainly, Kelvin. So in the early part in a way, and I was chatting to somebody about this the other day, in a way, my ability to start the business, to develop some thought leadership out of pretty much nowhere and zero credibility, to be invited to be a columnist, to write blogs that people were reading and sharing, all of that was the best case study I could have had for the existence of Cerebra. Because if I could do that, then I guess any customer could, or any employee could. And for a brand, that's like, wow, okay. So the traditional gatekeepers of influence, and media are not as influential as we deemed them to be before. And if social media makes the unpublished published, and Mike's an example of that, well, then maybe that dynamic is a signal. And that's not to suggest that what I was doing was even good or right or necessary. It just was. And now we've seen what happens when kind of anybody has the power to publish on social media, that, it has both really exciting potential and also quite terrifying ramifications.
Yeah, sure. The whole heavy chef kind of ideology. Yeah.
But I very quickly realized that if people were only working with Cerebra because I was there, or were only contracting with the business because of the hope of working with me, that was going to be unsustainable because you only have so much time. And so I made quite a deliberate attempt to steer energy away from building whatever brand it was that I had. It was sort of minuscule, but towards building the Cerebra brand, because I realized the moment I would have considered myself a legitimate entrepreneur was when somebody decided to work with Cerebra and have absolutely no knowledge of my involvement in it whatsoever. That would be the moment that it had reached a level of legitimacy and value in its own right that was completely independent of whatever input I had. And I think we got there. And kind of the proof of the pudding is, like, if you can sell a business like that and then walk away and it maintains its momentum and legitimacy in the market, then that's usually a good sign. And that was really important to me. I mean, probably also quite a lot of ego in that, but like also just like knowing that I built something of significance outside of my direct influence. The problem was that I feel like I did such a good job of that when I moved out of Cerebra, then nobody knew who I was anymore. So I was like, oh shit, I need to do that again. And I don't quite have the boldness and the ignorance and the naivety of youth anymore. Now I'm quite a it's been harder to do that now because I keep second guessing myself. I'm like, does anybody really want to hear from you? Or
well, let's get. I mean, we'll get back to that because I think that's quite an interesting conversation that we can lead into. But I'm really interested in how it started. So if we go a bit back, way back, that you went to Benoni High, right? Which I let's go all the way back. I mean, and I know there's a couple of my team and colleagues that are alma mater of Benoni High as well. So there's a lot of connections there. But a lot of the people that I've spoken to on this show and out in the world as well, the entrepreneurs that we speak to, you started making some side hustle cash in high school already, right? I mean, you had a couple of endeavors that you started doing before you got into the workforce, correct?
Yeah, well, I didn't want to do any real work, Kelvin. Like, I didn't want to go work at the local Blockbuster Video or anything. So what I landed up doing was I played the drums. I played the drums originally when I was quite involved in the church as a youngster. And so I learned to play the drums there. And then I realized other people wanted to play the drums as well. So I was like, rad, let me teach them to do so. Again, not great and certainly no authority to do so, but I was better than the other guy, so that was worth charging money for. And then the other thing that I did was I bred pet snakes, and flogged those to friends who probably had them for about a week and then gave up on them. So there's probably a really high percentage of non-indigenous snakes in the veld in Benoni to this day, and I might be responsible for that partly, but we'll deal with that at a later stage. I didn't come from an entrepreneurial family. And my dad is a diesel mechanic by trade and has worked flipping hard in the construction industry to become a plant director over the years. But I mean, he really worked the same job in 3 different companies for 40 years, as many of our dads did. My mom was a primary school teacher and just retired last year after 35 years in the same school. Astonishing contribution to formative education in Benoni again. Best formative education in the country. And And yeah, I didn't really even know the idea of being an entrepreneur existed until maybe my early 20s. I actually just thought I was really bad at getting jobs. I just thought I was really bad at knowing what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And you sort of find out later on that that might be a strength, and I definitely am to this day a generalist. Like I'm not particularly good at anything, but I'm quite average at a lot of things. And that sort of has helped me find ways to create value and connect dots across different sectors in a way that maybe other people might not have seen.
Yeah, I've kind of picked up on that as well. There's a lot of entrepreneurs that seem to fit the mold of generalists and wanting to do a couple of things as well. Not getting overly excited about that one thing that they are good at. So after high school, what did you do then? Did you just go straight out and get a job, or try and get a job? As you say, you struggled to maybe
No,
fit
well,
into any of
I
them.
went and saw one of those aptitude test people, the career guidance counselors, and they said, you are a people's person, so you should do industrial psychology and human resources. So I was like, cool, that sounds like a plan. And I went to the incredible tertiary institution known as Allenby campus, which was basically a satellite campus for UNISA, and I did I started an a BA industrial psych degree through LNB, which is like a campus in Boksburg, because it was close. That was the extent of my thinking about where I should go, and I hated it. It was terrible. I was bored, and all I really wanted to do was play in a band. And like I said before, I was quite involved in the church community at that stage. So I was kind of very, very committed to, but I just didn't really want to do the work. And so the first year was kind of okay. And then the second year, I decided not to go to campus anymore, just do the degree by correspondence. But I did a really shit job of that. I just wasn't disciplined enough. I didn't care enough about the work. So eventually kind of dropped out at the end of that year. And then took a couple of months break, and then restarted a degree with the credits that I had at UJ, at RAU. And that was more of a kind of audio-visual production management, sort of do more in the kind of film production or audio-visual production, which I thought was more my vibe, because I was, deemed myself to be more creative. And the problem there was that, like, I was older than everybody now at varsity. I was like by 2 years, so I didn't really fit in socially. I didn't enjoy that part of it. So, and the work again was just horrendously boring. So yeah, I ended up dropping out there as well, which again, I'm brutally aware, of how extremely irresponsible I was with the privilege of tertiary education at the time. It just, only a straight rich white man could be that flippant about the opportunity to study. It's something I really felt that I needed to make up for later on in life. So I went back to school and finished my degree eventually, because I just felt so shitty about.
What did you end up doing?
I ended up now, so in 2019, after I left Cerebra, I ended up going to business school to do a degree in social enterprise, actually, in the intersection between profit and impact. And I'm really passionate about that, and social entrepreneurship, especially in a place like South Africa, finding ways to solve big problems by binding and collaborating different sectors. So how do we solve problems by connecting the public sector, civil society, and business.
Yeah, love that.
I was very lucky to do that at the London School of Economics. So that was an amazing experience as well. Yeah.
Amazing. Congrats, dude. I before we move on from studying visual arts, wasn't there a video production Quito link at some point? Did that have something to do with that part of your life?
Well, I desperately wanted to get into the creative space, but at that point in time, I realized I didn't really have any experience or any exposure to it. And the more I understood what the advertising world did, the more I was like, jeepers, that sounds like something that I could contribute value to, or at least it's broad enough that I could apply a lot of different skills and interests to it. So, Kelvin, I must have applied at, I must have applied at 20 agencies for everything ranging from a runner to a junior copywriter to an account exec. Every big agency in the country at the time I applied to and interviewed at, and I didn't get a single opportunity because, and understandably, because I was just like,
Yeah.
I had no experience, and I was maybe enthusiastic, but like that unfortunately doesn't count for a hell of a lot in advertising, or in any industry for that matter. And feeling sorry for me, a friend of mine who worked at Video Lab in Blairgowrie, he had a mate who was who kind of jumped on the back of the Kwaito trend and was doing a lot of music videos for guys who were rising up through the ranks very quickly, and he needed producers to basically organize these videos. So I got paid 3,000 Rand to produce a song called, or the music video for a song called Izinja by Mapaputsi. And
Bit of
it
a
was
legend, isn't
one
he?
of the most fun experiences of my entire life. We shot at Oliver Tambo at the hospital. We shot, we destroyed an old Mercedes 220 in a junkyard and set it on fire. And
Awesome.
we even shot at Benoni Junior School against a massive green screen. But it was just an amazing experience. I loved it. It was, and I very soon learned that that's what I love doing. I love creating things by arranging resources and people and talent in a way that made sense. And like it,
Yeah.
yeah. So this little one of the lesser known experiences of my past, but it did help that it exposed me to at least the knowledge that I could do that work.
Sure.
And then, and then I realized I'd never get a job in an advertising agency. So I went cap in hand to my dad and said, listen, I at that stage, I'd met my future ex-wife and wanted to get married at the tender age of 21. And I went to my dad and said, look, I need to get a job. This university thing's not working for me. So he very kindly found me a telesales opportunity in a construction business, in a startup that were not really a startup. I mean, they were quite well established at that point in time, but they did replacement parts for earth moving equipment for Caterpillar. So they were interesting. That like there's a whole OEM original equipment manufacturer division, which you go to Caterpillar and you buy the nuts and bolts and whatever. And then there's a whole sort of secondary industry that went to the original manufacturers of these parts and components and said, can we just brand them something else and resell them? And Caterpillar hadn't secured patents or exclusive rights to all of those parts. So it basically grew an entire, so it was, I learned all about branding. I learned all about marketing. I learned all about how much money there actually is in the world. I learned about speaking Afrikaans to Willem van Straten in Bloemfontein and trying to legitimize selling our grader parts to him. But it was a very entrepreneurial business. And what I fell in love with was the idea of being an entrepreneur, being the master of your own destiny. It just so happened that I did it in an industry that was probably not a natural fit for me. But, I learned that it doesn't matter what you're selling or what you're doing. The principles of entrepreneurship are consistent throughout. And yeah, I think that's where the original seeds were planted.
So how did that then move into Cerebro? What was that big spark that made you make that jump, or wasn't it a big spark? Was it a gradual thing that just became
so I was
something?
there for a while, and then I left there to go and work for a guy that was importing welding machines, and he wanted me to set up that business for him. So I did that, and then I didn't like that. So then I went back to the greater people. And to cut a long story short, I was doing this and I was doing okay, and I was moving through the ranks, and I think they saw some potential in me, but I was just like, I was deeply unsatisfied. I was sitting there going, I feel like I'm a round peg in a square hole, and there is something else that I'm not seeing and not discovering. And I remember back then I've discovered Yahoo GeoCities. Do you remember GeoCities? It's a very old like CMS, like create your own website.
Sure.
And I remember I started a GeoCity site called Edward Says. It was edwardsays.geocities.yahoo.com or whatever. And Edward Says was like, it was a blog. I didn't know it was a blog at the time, but that's what it was. This was like 2002, 2003. And when blogging came around, I was like, this is kind of what I've been waiting for. I've been waiting for the ability to publish content online. And I just didn't know what it was called or how it would look. And one of the forerunning bloggers in South Africa at the time was a business called Tomorrow Today, which was run by Dr. Graham Codrington, still is today. And there were a very small handful of bloggers in South Africa. They were one of the guys in the community. Another bunch was Richard Mulholland and the guys at Joe Blog, Missing Link. They were very early. That's where I met Richard Mulholland. And to cut a long story short, I approached Graham and I said, listen, I'm really interested in this trend and I think it could be a legitimate business in its own right. And he was like, I think you're wrong. But if you want to make this happen, you can leverage off the back of our brand to do so. So I quit a very cushy job selling earth-moving spare parts. I mean, our son had just been born. We just moved and taken out a bond. And I decided to start a business with zero knowledge of what it meant to do so. Thank goodness, because if I'd known, I would have punched myself in the face. It was that stupid. And for the first 6 months, it didn't work. I just got turned away again and again and again. And it was just like, this was this very new, very fringe, very nerdy thing that nobody really cared about. And then luckily I met somebody called Samantha Rocky at SAB Miller. And Samantha Rocky said, well, I think you're onto something here, but like, it's not a marketing thing for us. It could be an internal communication thing for us. And we got our first client. That was, awesome. After 6 months, 2 personal loans and begging to my father-in-law for money because I couldn't go to my dad because he would have definitely punched me in the face after I dropped out of university twice. And the rest is history.
Yeah, that's not a bad first client to get, SAB Miller.
Very lucky.
Fantastic opportunity.
And I have Sonia Blichnote and a lot of other people to thank. I will never ever forget the people that made that possible. And I'll say this again and again, Kelvin, and it's not trite. I am the luckiest person you'll ever meet because I did not earn, and I certainly didn't have the credibility to get the start that I did in Cerebro. But things just conspired in my favor, and if there was any part of my personality that enabled me to take advantage of that, then I'm really grateful for that. But sure, but I got very, very lucky.
Yeah, but I guess there's also an element of putting yourself in that situation to accept that luck, right? I mean, without being able to identify it and take the risk and just grab it by the horns when it comes your way. I think that's one of the really incredible things about what you did and what people do in this industry. So you did mention to me at some point, you had a few tricky partnership experiences during that whole Cerebro journey. I mean, we don't have to go into specifics, but were there any specific learnings from that which you'd be aware of in future endeavors? Are you a little bit more wary of partnering up these days, or have the learnings kind of strengthened your confidence in how to do it?
I learned that I'm a pain in the ass to partner with. I learned that much. I don't think I'm the easiest person in the world to work with or to be married to, for that matter. Shout out to Anna. Because they're kind of the same thing. Being in partnership with somebody is like being in a marriage. In fact, it's maybe even more intimate because you tend to spend more time with your business partner than you do with which is a dysfunction of society, but a reality nonetheless. I think very early on, because of the nature of blogging at that stage, it was very open community, very open source, very, very collaborative, just geek meetups and everything else. We wanted to keep it super loose. And that's the thing that happens with business partnerships like that. It's super loose until, you start making money, and then it's super different. So I think, it was very kind of informal at first. As soon as things started to kind of legitimize, we realized we had to tighten up our agreements and make sure that we knew exactly what we were getting ourselves into. And so at that stage, sort of once Cerebro was formalized into a proper PTY limited, proper entity. In fact, I lied, it was the CC at that stage. And I was the sole shareholder. And then I met Angus Robinson, who at that time had started like a mobile media consultancy, which became Brandish. And Brandish and Cerebro just had a really close kind of alignment in terms of values, positioning, life stage. And what a lot of people don't know is that Angus and I were never formally partners, but we worked as closely as any partners ever would. So that these two businesses kind of grew in tandem. We shared clients, we shared staff, we shared office space, but we never really went, okay, let's like sandwich them together. And in 2009, I went through a divorce and I was a shambles. I'd made some pretty poor decisions. I'd handled myself badly. The business, Cerebro, I mean, Cerebro was kind of on the rocks. And Angus, to his credit, took up a lot of the slack, took up a lot of the pain. And again, I will forever be grateful to the guy because in dire straits, he picked up a lot of the slack. And kind of at the lowest of the low moments, he said to me, "Look, here's if you need to do a deal to get out of this and start something new, let's do that. Here's the number, and let's move on." And I was very seriously considering it. And I went away with Craig Rodney and Justin Spratt. Actually, I went away for a weekend with our families, wives, and friends. Christoph Appel was there with us as well. And I was talking to them about this and saying, I think this is something I need to do. I just need to kind of clear the pathway, clean the slate, and go, you know. And they were like, "That will be the dumbest thing you ever do. Like, don't do that. So whatever you're thinking of doing right now, don't do that." And so I decided to. It was kind of an ultimatum though, because it kind of had to be complete amalgamation with Brandish, or we had to move apart. And again, Angus handled it brilliantly. He's an absolute gentleman and a scholar. And he went off and started Native, and I went off kind of on my own. And then a year later, Craig said, "Look, why don't we do this thing where we join these two businesses together? Because I'm a traditional PR and I'm getting more questions about social and tech. You're a traditional social, well, if there is such a thing. You're getting more questions around the traditional media and PR side of things. And it made sense to join it together. And that was an amazing partnership for a very long time.
Yeah.
Craig is as near as damn it to a brother as I could have hoped for.
What was Craig's business again?
Emerging media.
Emerging media. That's right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it was only at the end of the Cerebro journey, after we'd done the deal, after we'd sold out or whatever, that Craig and I started to go on our own journeys again, you know, because I think that happens. Like, you develop as individuals, you develop as business people, you develop as as entrepreneurs, and sometimes your life circumstances change, your priorities change, and it's okay. It's okay to change direction. When I look back at my entrepreneurial journey, the only regrets that I have are that maybe I didn't conduct myself as well as I could have in partnerships. And that certainly is a big part of how I think about partnering now is how can I be a better version of a partner in the entities that I, you know, get involved in.
Yeah. I think there's definitely something there. You know, we're talking about your folks and my folks. I think everyone's folks from my generation staying at the same place, doing similar roles in different companies for 30, 40 years. That doesn't exist anymore. You know, I don't expect any of my colleagues to stick around for more than 3-5 years. That's just not how it works. And I guess the learning might be that your partners are not there for life either. Your business partners aren't there for life either. And go into it knowing that. And I guess just have those expectations from the beginning, right?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Especially when you care deeply about those people, especially when it's not a purely transactional relationship. And I don't know how to be transactional. Like, I have to care about somebody to want to work with them all the time, you know? So,
but that's okay. I mean, I mean, that's okay. It's you know, you guys are part of a journey for a while, and then there's an understanding that we probably won't spend the next 50 years together. So let's do this next little bit perfectly and easily. Maybe tell me that you're talking about that exit from Cerebro. Give me a couple of minutes on that, if you don't mind. How was that for you? You know, you got to sell to one of the more prominent companies in the industry, WPP. What was that experience like for you?
Oh man, it was amazing. It was the best learning curve of my life. I got an accelerated degree in corporate finance and negotiation very, very quickly. Somebody who's always been a terrible negotiator, that was hugely valuable. No, man, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I learned an absolute ton. Even when it was hard and challenging, I learned lessons that I think will be imperative for me as I journey forward. It was interesting watching Cerebro evolve in a corporate context. You know, a lot of my kind of assumptions about how those environments work, a lot of my naivety was exposed. And I learned about politics, and I learned about how to do some of the work that you, I guess, aren't accustomed to doing when you haven't really grown up in a corporate environment, or when you've kind of had the autonomy that comes with being an entrepreneur. But yeah, I think it really added structure, and it really added rigor to our business. And I think when we left Cerebra, it was a really cleanly run, beautifully structured, kind of wonderfully represented. I was very proud of the business it was at the end. I could confidently wrap a bow and go, this is a lack of business. And yeah, I mean, the leaving Cerebra was tougher than I anticipated it would be. It is for everyone. It was really important to me, though, that exit was clean and clear, and that people understood exactly what was going on. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs kind of treating exits a little bit like a messy divorce. They're sort of a bit in and a bit out, and nobody really knows. And then you come and sleep over for one night, and then so yeah. For me, it was like, and this is what happened. Like I planned to leave the last month, so the last day of November 2018. I announced that I would be leaving 6 months before that, in April. Everybody knew that was the plan, and the day I left was the last day I walked through those doors. I'd been back once to Cerebra, and that was for a poker evening. But I think that's important. I think being very clear about what's happening and managing that change efficiently is important for people. Agencies are very emotional businesses. They're very volatile environments, and you have to treat that with respect and care, because if you don't, you have a very negative impact on lots of people's lives.
Sure. How many years was it then that you were part of the business?
12.
12 years. So I mean, 12 years. I mean, you alluded to it earlier. Kind of defining yourself again at a different stage of your life. You maybe don't want to do exactly the same things that you did before. Did you have big plans when you were leaving? You left because you had these big plans to do something else, or was it something that you had to, I guess, rediscover for yourself after the fact?
Yeah, no, I didn't have plans at all, to be honest, Kelvin. The only plan that I had was to finish a degree. That was a goal that I had, sort of a pre-40 goal. I had ideas for things that I wanted to do, but I really did want to give myself some time to sort of percolate and think through, debrief post-traumatic stress disorder, and yeah, to give it due consideration. Having said that, I did that and had some really ambitious ideas for stuff that I wanted to do, and then 2020 happened. And I was like, okay, maybe don't do it now. Maybe not the best time to launch stuff. So it's been testing, because I've been a bit of a disappointment to myself. I think there's more that I would have liked to have done in this time. There's more value that I would have liked to have created, but I've given myself permission to be a little bit average for a while. And I suppose I've redirected energy into other endeavors. So I've taken up about 4,000 hobbies, and that's great. And yeah, just looking after.
Give us a couple of those. Not all 4,000. What are the kind of things that you
want to know? What I've started in the last few years. Yeah. So I did fly fishing before. I've become a lot more active in that, and I bought a fly tying kit, and I've tied, I think, a grand total of 8 flies. But that's high up on my hobbies list. I've taken up jiu-jitsu and MMA, which I love. I've taken up knife forging, bladesmithing, which is enormous fun. I'm doing a lot more photography, which I miss doing, and kind of creating that. What else have I done? That's about it, I guess. It's not that much.
Yeah, and then a highly successful podcast. I mean, how's that been going for you?
Well, it depends on what you're comparing it to, but from a low base, yes, a highly successful podcast. No, it's great. I'm loving it. It's a cool new experience. I'm learning a lot in the process. Show me an agency leader or ex-agency leader that doesn't love the sound of their own voice, and I'll show you a liar. But no, I enjoy really interesting conversations with really smart people, and it gives me a platform to do that.
Yeah.
And it forces me into a rhythm of doing that, and I think that's a good decision to have. Yeah.
So what is this next? What do you know? Do you have any big plans? What is the next big thing? 2021's here. Hopefully, it's not the same as last year. Maybe it's the time to take big steps.
Yeah. Even in my Cerebra journey, Kelvin, my preoccupation was with how difficult it is for leaders, especially in big corporates, and especially in big complex corporates that exert an enormous amount of influence over thousands of lives and over the economy and over the way that the world works, how difficult it is to do that work, the work of leadership, consistently and effectively, and look after oneself and the business that you're a custodian of, and do so in an impactful way, and do so with integrity and value. I mean, it's a huge job, and it's really tough to do. And I think it takes a massive toll on people and on the organizations that they run if they don't get it right. And I'm more and more convinced, and I think we have evidence of this everywhere, that we are in dire need of better leadership. We are short on leaders. It's maybe the most precious and rare and scarce resource on the planet right now is profoundly effective, impactful leadership. Now, I know how to help leaders do that within the context of technological disruption, but that's one narrow consideration in any leader's sort of set of things that I need to think about on a daily basis. So a lot of the work that I'm doing in Beyond Binary now is helping leaders think about technology in a far more sustainable and impactful way. But I would like to become far more credible in helping leaders navigate all sorts of realms of change and challenge. And yeah, I care very deeply about better leadership and leadership development. And I would love to start doing far more interesting work in that space.
Sounds very exciting, man. I can't wait. So yeah, as soon as you start kind of rolling that out, please let me know. I'd love to chat to you about that again.
No, as soon as I can get out and flip and away, you might see something rolling out.
So, dude, I mean, just to wrap up, we always kind of ask this question. We started off by trying to dig into, what are these small things or big things that have really shaped who you are and how you got to where you are. What would you say it is that gave you that unfair advantage to get to where you are now? Successful business that you were able to exit, time to grapple and forge knives and just be what I feel, I think you live a really full, happy life. And, what are the kind of things that maybe people starting out in the industry or starting their own businesses should look to and think about, that might give them a similar advantage?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, the caveat, Kelvin, is that I am lucky. I come from a privileged background. I was given opportunities that a lot of people wouldn't be given. And so I'm aware that a lot of what I say will sound like, it might come across as very sort of frustrating for people who feel like they weren't given the same opportunity. So, I mean, that's an important caveat. But I think the first thing was that when I started Cerebra, knowing the risks that I was taking on, I thought it, and I did. I can honestly say that I thought about this up front. And it wasn't something that I kind of retrospectively considered, but I was like, how will this be worth my while? Like, how will I know that this is better than being employed and being in a full-time job? And the measure for me was always like, can I say no? Like, can I say no to a meeting because I want to spend the afternoon at my kid's cricket match? And that was always the test for me. It was like, who am I beholden to? Like, what does my autonomy cost me? And how much control do I really have over my own time? Because that's all I have. Like and we've now learned this more than any time before, I think, in our lives, is that absolutely nothing is certain and all we've got is time. Like, that's it, right? Like, nothing is predictable. And so if I was the master of my own time, then I was the richest person in the world. And that was a big theme that kind of carried through all of my decision making and all of my decisions around where I was going to put energy and time. And then the other one was, I think, Ryan Holiday says this in his book, Ego is the Enemy. But being me and knowing that ego is one of the things that played a role in me getting to where I got to, it was always important to me that I figured out how to get out of the way. Because the moment I got out of the way, which is what we spoke about earlier on, kind of managing the dynamics between your own brand and the brand of the business. And I actually, a quote that I've lived by for many years and actually just reposted the other day because I needed a reminder about it. But it's remarkable what you can accomplish if it doesn't matter who gets the credit. And I really believe that, Kelvin. And I really believe that I I worked flipping hard at creating an environment at Cerebral where I didn't need the credit. We didn't need awards. I didn't need to be on a stage. I didn't need the spotlight. I didn't need to be the person running the meeting. I didn't need to be the person running our Friday BBGs. I never, in all our years, this is going to sound like I'm bragging, so I don't even want to say this, but in all of our years of entering awards and bookmarks and luries and whatever else it was, I never ever went up once on stage to receive an award. Never once. Not like I wasn't interested in it.
Yeah.
Maybe it was because I wasn't really doing the work, but yeah, point being, that was really important to me. That was a central focus of mine in the business, was that shit flows uphill and hierarchies work only if they relate to accountability and not to power. So if you want to be a great leader, figure out how to be the most accountable person in the room. One of the great dysfunctions of our industry is how often junior people get blamed for management's mistakes. It's a crime. It's really an unpleasant, dysfunctional cancer in our business. And I really wanted to try and create an environment that wasn't like that.
Yeah, I love it. And I think you did. So congratulations, dude, on everything. We're really looking forward to the next big thing. And I appreciate you joining me. I think there's such cool stuff in the last, what's that, 40 minutes, 45 minutes that we chatted.
Great efficient, didn't we?
Yeah. Cool. But dude, good to chat to you. Appreciate your time. And yeah, you good?
Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, man.